Prediction markets, they can be bigger than the stock market, and we think they will be bigger because it actually relates to way more people.
Prediction markets are growing far faster than previously expected. What do you think it is that's driving this hyper growth?
We always knew that, if we actually made this work, everyone and their moms would want to come and compete with us because it's just such a massive market, right? If you look at our growth this year, we're trading over $1 billion a week.
Who is trading on Kalshi?
A lot of people expect that it's just the Wall Street people and things like that. But actually, some of the most profitable traders are people from very, very different backgrounds. You have like meteorologists that are some of the most successful weather traders out there.
So what would you say to a critic who said that what we're seeing in prediction markets is a bubble?
We don't really spend time thinking about the critics, so.
I'm Sammi Cohen, and this is Social Currency, a podcast that unpacks the stories that are shaping business, culture, and the intersection of the two.
Today, I'm speaking with a founder who's building one of the most fascinating and, for some, controversial companies in fintech right now. Luana Lopes Lara is the co-founder of Kalshi, the CFTC-regulated prediction market that lets you trade on the outcome of real-world events. And I also have some huge news to share with you all. Last week, the news broke that Luana is officially the youngest female self-made billionaire in the world. And I filmed this interview with her right before the news came out, so I am extra excited for you guys to listen. And if you've seen prediction markets suddenly pop up everywhere this year, Luana's work with Kalshi is a huge reason why. Kalshi is one of the fastest growing tech companies in the country. Luana and I get into the stats in this episode, and they are very impressive. But what makes this story even wilder is that they had to build a regulatory moat the size of a fortress to even get here, becoming the first and only prediction market fully approved by the CFTC, which Luana tells me was as brutal as it sounds. In our conversation, Luana gets into the ripple effects of the 2024 election on the business, how they decide which events are tradable, the booming new Labubu market, the psychology of their users, and why she thinks prediction markets might rival stock exchanges sooner than anyone expects. This is Luana Lopes Lara's Social Currency. Luana Lopes Lara, welcome to Social Currency.
Thank you for having me.
I have interviewed so many founders and CEOs on the show, but your background specifically and your experience really stands out to me. Just to name a few things, and we're going to get into this during the show, but you're a classically trained dancer. You pivoted to finance, and that's where you worked. And now you're building one of the most complex corners in tech and markets. So I wanted to call that out.
Thank you.
Pretty impressive background.
Thank you.
And so we're going to dig into it a little bit more. So you were a ballerina growing up. What lessons from the world of dance do you apply to what you're doing today?
Yeah, and first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to chat. My sister's a big fan of your podcast. So in Brazil, I'm from Brazil, born and raised. It's very normal for kids when they're like 2 years old to start doing ballet classes. So that's how I started. And from the start, I just fell in love with it. And just throughout the years, I started doing more and more and more and more. And I was in a professional school, pretty much training 8 hours a day when I was in high school. And I think that realistically, ballet is probably one of the things that impacted my life the most and impacted Kalshi and everything that I've done since. I think that one of the biggest lessons there really has been the discipline side. Kalshi has been a very hard company to build in terms of the amount of ups and downs and years of regulatory battles and things of the sort. And the discipline that you get from ballet to be able to wake up even with terrible news and just you have to do it every day. You have to go and get your goals done and everything like that. This helped a lot. And the other side is like ballet is very good at teaching about delayed gratification in a way, which is kind of tied to discipline, but is like being able to be, it's going to be very painful and very hard for X period of time, but the long term, the vision, what we're trying to build is very important. And I think this concept of delayed gratification in ballet, a lot of it is tied to like you're injured, you need to dance anyway. And how do you deal with like the pain, but actually to not lose your role and things of the sort. So I think those two things probably what I got the most from ballet.
Yeah, a lot of long-term thinking, especially in your space and how long you guys have been doing this. But I want to back up a bit and really set the tone, especially for someone who's listening to this conversation, may have heard of Kalshi, they don't really know what it's all about. Let's get the P0 beginner version out there, and then of course we'll dive deeper. But for someone who's hearing about Kalshi for the first time, can you describe it in the most simplest way?
Think about Kalshi as the stock market, but for everything. So in terms, you go to the stock market, you can buy and sell stocks. You go to Kalshi and you can buy and sell what's going to happen in the future, in any future event. So things from who's going to win an election, and you can buy and sell shares of different candidates, who's going to be the top Spotify artist of the year, and things of the sort. So we really letting people trade on everything.
I love that definition. And in creating the company, so you were studying at MIT, and that's where you met your co-founder. Can you describe how you first met your co-founder, and second, how you went from, okay, we're talking about ideas in different spaces to, okay, we are going to start this company together?
Yeah, so we met actually in the first year of school. And a part of it was because I'm born and raised in Brazil. Tarek, he's actually American, but he grew up in Lebanon. So all the internationals kind of like bundled together. So we became friends from the very start, and we have very, very similar interests. So we took the same classes. We even interned both at Citadel and at Five Rings, just a small prop shop in New York together. Actually, like deciding to start a company was a very organic thing. It wasn't one day we woke up and it's like, oh my God, you're my perfect co-founder, let's do it. It was actually like throughout years of college, we were noticing a lot of behaviors in finance and things that we were noticing in common and talking about it. And there was a day that we were spending like hours and hours and hours talking about it in the beginning of our masters. And we were like, well, if someone's going to do it, it should be us. Let's just go to this hackathon, try to start it. And it was very organic because we just were so in love with the same idea. And it really was like 3 years of all of our finance experience building up to the idea to get it. It was the idea that pulled us, and it really was a very organic way to start, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And how old were you guys at the time?
We started the company, we were 22. Wow. So yeah, it's a long time ago. Time flies.
That's amazing. And so the world of prediction markets was very different than it is today. I don't know if I can say non-existent, but very different from where it is today. When you were deciding on this is the market that we're going to go after, this is the company that we want to build, what was it like speaking with initial investors? Because now there's so much hype around it. It's easier to raise money in this space. But what was that like?
Well, prediction markets themselves are not necessarily a very new idea, right? They've been studied for a very long time. Is this like information markets, the wisdom of the crowds to better forecast the future? All of the ideas have been there for a long time, but no one has actually been able to do it in a regulated way and, in a big mainstream way. There are two types of investors. There were investors that really want to be like, what are the numbers and what is the traction and all those things. And for those investors didn't want to talk to us really. But then there was a lot of the other investors that were more like, there's a very small chance it's going to work. You guys are going to even be able to launch. But if it does, it's going to be very big. Mm-hmm. And I think those are the investors that we talked to from the start, and they invested in us even before we got regulated. Because it was a hard business to invest in, because it took us from starting the company to being able to launch a product in the US took us 3 years without anything. So it was very important to get the support from the right investors from the start.
And when you were at the very beginning raising your first round of capital, were you even able to go to VCs, or was it angels?
We started the company in Y Combinator, which is this big startup accelerator in California. So that helped us quite a bit because we got the money from YC, and at the end of the demo day, everyone raises capital, so that helped. For a lot of investors, I think when they're thinking about angel checks on like a seed round, they think a lot about what's the background, what's the team, and I think that they liked both Tarek and I, so that helped. After that, we raised a couple rounds to today. We're still raising money.
Yes. I saw that you guys recently raised or announced the raise a month ago or a few months ago.
Right. The raise was I think before August. So it was just delayed, the announcement, but yeah.
At a $5 billion valuation?
Yep.
Damn, girl. Okay. All right. And so you mentioned the regulation piece. Mm-hmm. And so Kalshi is very unique in the way that it operates. It's CFTC regulated. How difficult was it to go through that regulation process?
Honestly, we look back and we're like, how did we do it? It was very difficult because it was 3 years. It was a very binary decision that took us a very long time to get there. Like if we didn't get regulated, the company would be worth zero. And for us, it was almost very hard, psychologically to think about we are, 22 to 25 years old, and we're betting our entire careers pretty much. All of our friends are going to Citadel. They're going to do all these things into this thing that most people say it's lower than 1% chance it's going to work. So it was very tough in that sense, but also because what we're doing is round of questions from the government. So the government will say these markets are easy to manipulate. They are bad. They're bad for this reason. They don't fulfill this principle or whatever. And we'd have to go back and do the analysis and say no, you're wrong. This is why all of your concerns are not real, and send it back. And they're like, okay, out of these 20 questions, We accept the answer to 3. We have follow-up on 17 and we have another 10. I think a lot of the work we've done at the time really helped and are in the kind of cornerstone of the company too today on the compliance side. But my co-founder likes telling the story. It's like, you think you're like climbing a mountain and you think that the top of the mountain is like closed and you're like, oh, I can get there. So you keep going. And when you get there, you're like, oh, damn, it's actually like twice as high. And you keep going and it's actually like twice as high. And I actually think that helped though, because I think if from the start we knew it was going to be 3 years, I think it would have been harder. But we always thought we were 6 months away. So it made it a little easier.
I actually am realizing too, as you're describing all of this, a lot of people may not be aware of the differences between the CFTC, the FTC. Can you provide a little bit more background?
So the SEC regulates everything to do with like securities trading. So things like stocks and things like that. The CFTC is the sister agency that pretty much regulates everything that has to do with commodities. So events and things like prediction markets are regulated by the CFTC. There are other agencies in DC that do like consumer protection and things like that, but they're not actually like financial regulators. So there's these main 2 that are relevant to us, and the CFTC is our regulator.
And when you finally got that regulatory approval, did you find that users really felt as though this was a step change in perhaps reputational trust? Or I'm curious from the user perspective, what that really means to them.
There's a lot of things that help, right? If you think about power users that have been thinking about prediction markets, trying to trade like small experiments and nonprofits that have tried to do these things before, for them, it's like, it was the first time they saw a chance of their hobby or what they do or what they believe in to become real and mainstream. But for the vast majority of users, it really was like, okay, like I don't think my money is going to be taken from me because the federal government's regulated. It's regulating them. I can actually pay with a debit card and access an app and all of those things that make a big difference, because there have been prediction markets like the offshore type prediction markets that have existed before, but there's so many risks. And I think that what the regulation helped is establish that as a mainstream real product in the US that everyone could use in a safe way. And I think it really, really helped, especially compared to there's a lot of the crypto stuff that people get scammed and things like that. And I think that being regulated really helped, establish us as different and safe.
I think it helps. The CFTC regulation is a point of differentiation, right? When we're looking at other players in the space, because there are other behemoths that we're aware of, right? Polymarket being the first one that comes to mind. How does the regulation work for someone like them? Because I think for the prediction market, they're also a name that people think about. The way I understand it is Kalshi is the only predictions player that is regulated by CFTC. And so earlier you had mentioned that if you weren't regulated, the company valuation would be 0, right? So can you walk me through how it works and like how they're able to do it?
I don't want to speak about other players in the space that much, but it's basically the way that we think about it is being safe and regulated is very important for what we've wanted to build. What we want to build is the everything exchange, right? Is allowing people to trade on everything that's going to happen in the future. The only way to do that in our mind is to have a safe and regulated space. And you see like why so many partners have chosen to work with us, from, Robinhood, Webull, Prize Picks, and also like a lot of other folks in the space are choosing to work with us, is because we actually have the safeguards and things in place. And in the US, if you're offering contracts and trading to US participants, you need to have a license to do these things and do these things legally. And that's why we think it was a kind of a necessary step for us to achieve our mission. We're not going to be as big as we want to be and have all the players we want trading if we're not a safe space, a safe market. That's why we were like, let's go to the elephant in the room first, which is let's make this thing legal, let's make this thing safe. And then we know we're going to be able to grow it because it's just going to have open a whole new space. So that's kind of how we think about it. I think nowadays, the way that we see our future is really about, we have the best product. I think we have, as you said, pretty much one of the only viable products in the US. And I think that what I tell the team all the time is our goal, we think we have like 6 months to 2 years of a lead time. How do we increase that time? What work do we do? What strategy do we do? We need to work harder so that we increase that lead time. But the 2 years become 5 years, and how do we think about, we're winning because we have a better product, and our job is to make sure we have a better product.
And from a brand awareness perspective too, I am seeing Kalshi everywhere right now. I follow this Instagram account that's like, they do memes, but they do a bunch of stuff. called kale salad. And I see,
oh, really? That's cool.
well, and I see Kalshi on there all of the time talking about, how Kalshi is, doing what you're doing. And I think from a top of funnel brand awareness perspective, in my opinion, Kalshi is winning right now.
Yay.
So it's really exciting to see, because obviously you've done all of this work on the regulation side. You've put literally countless meetings to get this over the line. And now actually that you're there, it's totally about market penetration.
It's interesting because we've really started putting a lot more focus on marketing, I think, in marketing like a year and a half ago. And we've been learning so much about it. And it's just marketing is very fun to think about it. Like, how do we think of like strategy, like which demographics we want to go after? Like, we are very lucky that our product is very easy for us to create markets that are relevant to everyone. Like today we just announced we actually have Labubu markets now, how high the prices are going to go and things of the sort. And like from Dancing with the Stars to things like sports to things like elections, we really have such a broad range of markets that we can really advertise and market to everyone, and almost at every point in time they're very relevant markets. So for us, it's really building that operation, that almost marketing operation of like what's relevant today, what's in the news, how do we target, how do we market it, and kind of having that motion every day.
And we're going to get into some of the areas that you can trade on in Kalshi. But since you've done all of this work, do you envision, is it something that your team ever talks about, the new players that have seen you go through, they know that regulation is now allowing this? Are you starting to see all of these competitors, even though they're probably tiny, crop up now?
Yeah, we always knew that, if we actually made this work, everyone and their moms would want to come and compete with us, because it's just such a massive market, right? If you look at our growth this year, we're trading over $1 billion a week. We want competition. Like, let's go and make this market as big as we can be. And so, yeah, there's a lot of people coming into the space, from very established players to smaller players. But what I told you is like, we really focus on product. We just need to have the best product, the best liquidity. And I think that the rest, and the best marketing, as you said, and the rest will go from there.
Yes. And just yesterday, there sounds like there's a lot of news popping up for Kalshi. Just yesterday, there was an article in Bloomberg that said prediction markets are growing far faster than previously expected, and they will rival stock exchanges in just a few years. First off, like, moment of silence for that, 'cause that is crazy.
I know, it's insane.
Did you guys envision that the market would grow that quickly? Like, what do you think it is that's driving this hyper growth?
Now we're seeing the result of 5-6 years of work we've been putting to really seeing this hit mainstream now, with South Park mentioning us and the volumes we're seeing. Prediction markets, they can be bigger than the stock market, and we think it will be bigger than the stock market because it actually relates to way more people. If you sit down at dinner, you're talking about Costco financials, or what's going to happen to the CEO of this company. You're talking about what happened in culture, what's happening in health. We're going to see another pandemic. You're talking about these things. And what prediction markets are is a way to actually get information and price all these things about the future. And that's why we think it's going to be a lot bigger. Like, we think that like the 2028 election should be bigger than $1 trillion market. And it's just a matter for us of like, how do we keep growing and make sure we're building the systems, building the engineering and all of that to get there. We always say that we're biased because this is our child. This is like, we want prediction markets to be the biggest thing it can be, but we really don't see a way, and it's not as big or not bigger than the stock market, if that makes sense.
So what would you say to a critic who said that because all of this growth is happening so quickly right now, that what we're seeing in prediction markets is a bubble? What would you say?
I think it's just a bad way to look at it. I think people look at anything that's growing, and there's always someone that wants to be like, oh, this is like, happens with AI. Happens with every very, very big technology that is like going and growing a lot. There's going to be critics trying to claim the other side. I think the benefits to the world from prediction markets, we saw it in the elections, we're seeing in so many places, is here to stay. And more people are mentioning and using and trading these markets. We don't really spend time thinking about the critics. So,
and actually on that note, because I saw this is actually from the Kalshi blog. We've already talked about this, but Kalshi's become one of the fastest growing tech companies in the US and the fastest growing company outside of the AI industry. In the past year alone, trading volume has grown 200x, and this is probably a little bit outdated, and user base has grown 20x. Kalshi now accounts for over 60% of global prediction market activity, despite previously being confined to the US. I read that, and I think that was the moment for me where it was like, this is real, it's coming, and it's going to I think infiltrate back to what you said around what people are talking about at their dinner table, right? Because this is something that people feel a lot more, I think, also emotionally connected to. Even if you're not in the finance space, I think there's an emotional level around being able to make these predictions around everyday events.
Right.
So previously, Kalshi was just in the US in terms of what could be predicted on. What international markets are you the most excited about now?
The point is that everyone is an expert on something, right? And I think that that's the difference. You're in the dinner table and you're talking about culture and pandemics and things of the sort. But it's not just about talking about it. It's also because a lot of people have deep knowledge about things that they actually can come and monetize. If you think about Uber, you could go and you know how to drive a car, so you can make money driving a car. Or Airbnb, you have a house, you can become a host. With us, really is like, what prediction markets will get that big is because everyone, any knowledge they have, any hobby they have, they're able to turn their passions into profit. And really, like, if you think you're an expert on something, you can actually monetize that. And we have so many examples of people that are doing this. There's this one specific user that Ariana Grande superfan. That's actually the best way to describe it is like an Ariana Grande superfan. Heard about Kalshi because of the elections, wasn't very interested in the elections, but found out we had music charts and what's going to top the charts, and started trading and making money and learning about markets, and has made over $60,000, paid back all their student loans. Now their new goal is like make enough money to buy a house. That is actually available to everyone because we have so many markets and everyone can make money on it. And that's the other side of making it so broad that is important. It's the topic of conversation, but also that like we're just democratizing or opening access to ways to make money to a lot more people. But yeah, back to the international question. So we are excited about a lot of different countries. And I think a lot of what we're doing now is actually, mapping out the world and what partners we want in different countries. I think that there's different countries with different strategies and things like that. It's not our number one focus. Our number one focus is still winning the US market and growing it here. We are going to be way more aggressive about growing internationally in the coming months and years. So
I know we spoke a little bit earlier about the demographics of people who are using it, but I wanted to actually double click into this around the ages. Are you seeing that age dispersion across really anyone from Gen Z to boomers and above?
Yeah, pretty much across the board. We actually have a lot of users that are like obviously on the 20 to 30s range, but also a lot of users that are like 70 and are thinking about it as risk mitigation and things of the sort. So it really has been like across the board.
Is it mostly men now?
I think it's over 50% men, but we actually, I think, have like a lot of women in the platform. It's very intuitive to get started. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's very transparent and safe. And I think that women appreciate that. And I think we have a lot of markets that women are excited about and like trading as well. So compared to other folks in similar industries, we're way higher percentage, but I think men are still over 50%.
And you mentioned briefly the election. Mm-hmm. So that seemed to be the watershed moment for your company.
Yeah.
So how did the entire election cycle change your business?
The elections actually have an interesting, a funny background story because I told you it took 3 years to get regulated. And when we got regulated and launched, there was actually still another elephant in the room, which were the election markets. And we worked with the CFTC for 1 to 2 years, and they were saying, no. We had like big comment periods, which is normal for when they asked the public to opine, and everything was very positive, but the CFTC did not let us list it. So we had to sue them because we knew we were right on the law. Like legally, you're able to offer and trade election markets. So we had to sue our own regulator, and we won the lawsuit actually 1 month before the election. And people thought it was like a partisan thing, and it really wasn't. All the judges decided that said we were right on the law were Democrats, and we have support from the It's always been a bipartisan thing that everyone kind of supports these markets, but the CFTC at the time. And we were able to list these markets, and there had been a ban for over 100 years in the US. Election markets were legal, and they, on election day, used to be bigger than the stock market trading volume back in like 1920s. And then with the Great Depression, they banned election markets with a lot of other things. And we were last year able to bring them back 100 years later. The last 2 weeks, we had like over $2 billion traded, millions of new accounts, #1 in the App Store. And it was really this like vindication moment because a lot of the critics, again, were saying that like would destroy democracy. It was very bad for everyone and things like that. And actually, if you look at what happened, markets were the best way to forecast what was going to happen. The entire time we were saying Trump was around 65% of chance of winning, while the polls were saying it was 50-50. And it was that insane moment that we saw see like the value of these markets are here. You can see why the markets were better at forecasting what was going to happen. After the polls closed on election night, it was around 30 minutes. It was like 6:30 or something, that Trump was already a 95% chance of winning because of early votes. It really was, even in the media, you see this kind of change in behavior, how they were talking about the markets. They were very skeptical before, then they were like, wow, this is actually valuable. And I think in this election cycle this year, same thing. Mondani was quoting the Kalshi odds on stage in multiple rallies and talking about them and everything. And it's just great to see it as kind of mainstream now in the political world to use these markets and use these odds to do it. And I think that every growth we've had is kind of like that election market being able to list it and seeing what happened after was just so important for us.
I think on that note around the elections, I believe that Kalshi is actually going to take out the voter polling surveys. Before an election, they'll say like, oh, the surveys are saying blah, blah, blah. They're always wildly inaccurate. It's like, who is doing these surveys and who are they asking?
Yeah, do you know anyone that's ever answered?
No.
I don't.
No. And obviously, we'll get to the Mamdani numbers and all of that. Going away from elections, how does Kalshi decide which events are even tradable in the first place?
We try to list as many markets that users suggest and ask for as we can. Obviously, there's a very strict compliance procedure to make sure the markets aren't easy to manipulate, they aren't on prohibited categories, things of the sort. But we really tend on like, it's better to have markets, and because even if it's, fewer people, like, Labable futures, maybe not that many people are interested in it, but it's still valuable information for a group of people to trade and get the price and see what's going to happen. We have a market team in-house that pretty much writes the legal contract that is the base of every one of these markets, writes them down and passes through compliance and all of that. There's 3 things that define gray markets. The first one is disagreement. Is it something that people actually disagree on? The second one is volatility. Is there actually going to be news that move prices up and down? And the last one is like, are these actually important questions, right? If you think about a lot of markets that we had that were very big, like will TikTok be banned in the US? It was actually a very important question. There was a lot of disagreement on whether it should be banned or whether it would be banned, and also a lot of volatility. And it's a very important question for us to price and have like a forecast of what's going to happen. So we try to list as many markets as we can, but these are the 3 kind of categories that we're like, if the market hits these 3 points, we need to have it.
One key differentiator as well for Kalshi is the world of sports. So I'm sure that has been a very successful for Kalshi, the fact that you can make these predictions on sports. But what pushback have you gotten from the sports world? Because I'm sure, especially the sports betting world is thinking, damn, I wish I was Kalshi now.
That is a great question. I think that for us, it's important to have sports markets. And the way that we frame new markets, again, is because we want to have markets on everything. And we want everyone to find markets that they are interested in. Mm-hmm. And there's so many people that are interested in sports. And there's just like another demographic that we can open the platform to. In terms of pushback, like, look, we operate like a stock market, right? We're not a casino. You're not betting against Kalshi. You're not trading against Kalshi. We just facilitate trading between different people. And that's why we are federally regulated and all of that. There's a lot of problems with the sports betting model. I think we're very different from that model. I think there's a lot of almost unquestionable problems with that model, which is there's no fairness in price. You only have one, like the house setting the odds for you, and there's no competition on the price. There's no fairness or transparency on the price. You don't actually know if the price that someone's getting is different from yours and things like that. After that, if you start winning money, they can cap you and they can be like, you can't participate anymore. There's a lot of unfairness in the way that sports betting works than I think exchanges are better models for. But again, we're just fundamentally different, right? We function more like a stock market. Sports is just another category we're excited to expanding to because we want people to be able to trade on anything. There's a lot of experts on sports out there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Outside of elections, is that one of the most popular categories?
Yeah, for sure. Sports are very popular. Elections and things, politics, very, very popular. We actually have markets on mention markets that we call them, which is basically what people are going to say in different events. Have also been very, very popular. Entertainment and culture have been growing a lot. Now have markets on like reality TV and things of the sort, but also like charts, Oscars, Grammys, all of that stuff. I would say those are probably the biggest categories, but we have everything from like, like research papers being published and things of the sort to way bigger markets.
Are there any topics or categories that you wouldn't list?
We don't do anything related to terrorism, assassination, or all of that stuff. We wouldn't do it anyway, and it's also not allowed to be done in the US. There's clear regulation on that. And also things that like one person can really impact the results. So for example, we have markets on hurricanes or other type of natural disasters because humans cannot impact a hurricane happening in any way. But we don't have markets on wildfires, for example, because that's easier to manipulate. So that's kind of how we draw the line. There are clear categories we never go even close. And otherwise, just are these important questions that information is actually valuable and whether a single person can impact the outcome, then we don't list them either.
What's so interesting about this, and as I was thinking about the differences between traditional stock market investing and something like Kalshi, everyone's an expert in something, right? Maybe I'm an expert in Labubus. I'm obsessed with Pop Mart.
Nice.
I know all of the different varieties. I'm not, but let's just say hypothetically. And then you can be this, like as close to the foremost expert in a space, and then you can actually create some value out of your expertise when you come to Kalshi. And that's you can't really do that in any other space, right?
Exactly. For example, Ariana Grande superfan.
Yeah.
That's exactly what happened to him. But also, I guess I'll ask you a question. Who do you think is one of the most profitable traders on inflation?
Oh gosh, profitable traders on inflation? You've stumped me. I have no idea.
Right. It's actually a news junkie from Kansas that has never traded, financial markets, any of that before. And he just reads the news, reads like everything around it. And he's been able to beat the markets trading inflation for the past year. They've made like millions of dollars doing that.
Wow.
And it's also just like, there is the aspect of, everyone can be an expert in something and everyone is an expert in something. And this is really a way for you to monetize it. And I think a lot of the demographics behind who's trading on Kalshi is actually very surprising to a lot of people.
Okay, so I need to hear more about that. Who is trading on Kalshi?
It's everyone. And I think that's kind of like the crazy thing because a lot of people expect that it's just the Wall Street people and things like that. But actually, some of the most profitable traders are people from very, very different backgrounds that have just been like, this has been my hobby for the past X number of years, and now I'm going to find a way to monetize. We have like meteorologists that actually are some of the most successful weather traders out there. There's also a lot of people that use the markets to see how good they are at something. So it's almost like a validation of, okay, I think I'm good at music, or I think I'm good at politics. So I'm actually going to use the markets to validate if like I'm actually correct about a lot of things, which is another use case. Our most successful traders come from a very, very wide variety of places and backgrounds and everything.
That's interesting. And also, I think, empowering too, because people feel, and I'm speaking for myself, I feel intimidated by the idea of day trading, right? Because you have to like really be up to date on the latest and greatest that's going on with the company.
Right.
And it's nice to know that your expertise can help you in other ways.
The stock market is very, very, very competitive, right?
Yeah.
If you think about it, there's all these hedge funds and everyone trading. It's very hard for you to actually have a winning strategy for the long term. But with Kalshi, we have so many markets that you can really like a lot of different strategies. Like people that have full-time jobs or actually 2 jobs, they're able to have strategies that they are like trading very long-term things. So then they actually don't need to be like actively monitoring everything. And it's just because it's a new space, there's more opportunity to make money. And a lot of like new funds are starting to trade on Kalshi and things like that. There's just a couple of people trading certain things. So I think there's more opportunity on that end too.
Mm-hmm. We've talked a lot about these big moments that bring a lot of people to the platform because they want to weigh in. What have you seen from the user behavior standpoint around these big macro events? Have you seen anything interesting that surprised you?
People think that very big events are going to have bias in some way or another. And what we've realized is that like, and what research has said as well, is that there is no bias in the markets. And that I think is very interesting for us to see, because if you're biased in one way or another on like this party or this team or something, there's just money left on the table for sharper traders to come and bring the price back to what a fair value is. So the market self-corrects to a fair value very quickly. It's a very common misconception that these markets can be prone to bias or manipulation when actually all the research points to the other side, and they're actually less prone to any of this than the very big markets that everyone talks about, like the stock market and things like that. On the potential to manipulation point that people talk about that I think is interesting on user behavior is that folks talk about how, if there's one piece of news, it's going to really move the markets and things like that. And there was a very interesting point on this last election that Decision Desk HQ, which is a great platform, we love them, but everyone makes mistakes. They called the Seattle mayor election too early to the wrong person. And that didn't move the markets at all because the markets were, they are trying to price and correctly price the future. So even something at that size doesn't actually manipulate the markets. So I think a lot of the disconnect there is that people think these markets are way more prone to bias and manipulation than they are. They're very, very resilient because people are putting money where their mouth is. And if you're putting money where your mouth is, you're incentivized to do research, to, think more rationally about what you think is going to happen and all of that. And then it becomes a way better forecast of what's going to happen in the future because people are putting money where their mouth is.
How do events with very asymmetric outcomes, like a catastrophe scenario, right? You said that you can predict something around a hurricane or some kind of natural disaster. How does that affect risk or liquidity on the platform?
The risk part of these contracts, what we actually see a lot of people do on Kalshi, different from making money on what they know and things like that, is people actually hedging concerns that they have about the future. Hurricane is a great example, but another great example is student loans. There was that forgiveness or forbearance at the time, and we actually saw people buying that as a hedge in a way that if the Supreme Court would take down student loan forgiveness, they would get paid and they could use that to pay their student loans.
Oh, wow.
So you see a lot of people actually using prediction markets as a way to mitigate risk in their own lives on top of getting information. Hurricane is another example that we see a lot of people being like, well, my insurance has massive deductibles and there's all these issues. I live in Florida, and they actually buy prediction markets so that if they do need to evacuate and there's a high deductible, they can use the winnings from the market to cover their deductibles or cover their evacuation costs and things like that. So it is a very good risk mitigation tool for a lot of people. In the individual level, also a lot of companies are using it from the government shutdown. There was this big startup called Arrived actually that used prediction markets on the government shutdown length to hedge a lot of the risk because they work with regulators that were just not working for so long, and there was a lot of delay in the roadmap. Risk mitigation, actually, prediction markets are a great new tool for risk mitigation from businesses and individuals across the board. And we're seeing that a lot. In terms of liquidity, after having a market on a certain topic, liquidity is the most important thing. And right now, we're the most liquid prediction market by far. And it means that you're able to buy a big size of what you want, right? So if you want to buy, Gavin Newsom, when the election, you buy $1,000 or $10,000. And it's actually a lot of our focus on how to make the long tail of markets very, very liquid. So we have a lot of different market makers, and we have a lot of retail market makers, like day traders, like I talked about. All they do is actually provide liquidity on these markets and things like that. For long-term and kind of asymmetric markets, like you mentioned, we also give interest on the positions you're holding. So if you buy something at 1% or 2%, the other person that's locking in 99%, they're actually getting interest on that money. So that helps.
All right. So now we're going to go to some industry hot take questions.
All right.
So bring your hottest takes.
Okay.
So what is your hottest take on how people misunderstand prediction markets?
I would have to say back to the bias and manipulation point. That I think it's one thing that's very funny that we see is whenever, for example, there's an election, whoever is ahead on the election really likes the markets, and who's not ahead thinks the markets are being manipulated. It goes from the presidential election on one side to for example, the New York election on the other side. And I think it's just, there's a lot of coping going on, if that makes sense. Yeah. And people try to blame the markets versus looking into their campaigns and what they're saying and things of the sort.
What category of markets will explode in popularity within the next 5 years?
I would have to say the entertainment markets. They are growing a lot and we're very excited about them. And they have such a broad range, right? From music to movies to video games. I think they're going to be very, very big.
Prediction markets reveal how people think, obviously. But are there any biases that we haven't talked about in terms of how people use the platform that you think are super interesting?
There are people trying to do research right now to see if there's a bias on yes versus no and who's actually buying more yeses versus more nos. I don't think the research is done yet, but I'm very curious to see what are the results of that research there and what demographic is more biased to taking a yes versus a no, but nothing comes to mind outside of that research right now.
Okay, and we've talked a ton about Kalshi as a business, operationally how it works, the larger industry, but I want to ask a few questions about you as a founder and leader of this massive company. With all of the very high highs, the very low lows, especially as you were working to get the regulation over the line, how do you personally manage that and really handle the stress of entrepreneurship?
Yeah, it's a great question. I really think for me, it's like the support system I have. It's my family, my fiance, my parents, my sister, my fiance, my dog are always there for me. And I think that helps a lot. A very hard thing is that you need to be there for the team and be like, we're going to figure this out and we're going to win this. Even if you're upset about something and you're questioning things, the amount of times that I was been like very upset about something, I just called my fiance. I was like, can you just come like walk around the block with me and things like that so I can relax. And then he goes. And I think the level of support I get from these 4 people is just insane. And I wouldn't be here without them.
From a founder perspective, because I talk to so many entrepreneurs, CEOs of companies, that even if their companies are doing massively well, there's always something that keeps them up at night with their business. Is there anything right now that's keeping you up at night?
For me, it really is, how can we build the best team so that we can not just keep our lead, but increase our lead. That's what's in my mind. Is like, if we think we have 6 months to 2 years ahead of everyone else in the space, who are the right people we need to hire? And what is our strategy to make that 3, 4, 5 years so that when, people blink, they're like, it's impossible to catch up to Kalshi. And I think it's just these questions. It's building the right team and having the right like culture, execution, and strategy in place so that we can extend that.
And hiring people to join your team. Also, it's such a new space. It's moving very quickly. When you're growing your team, I mean, you're also growing across everything, right? Marketing, the behind the scenes operationally. Of course, I would imagine you also have a pretty large team that's actually on like engineering / data science side.
Yeah, a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah. And one strategy we've used is like, when we're hiring for a specific team, we find the company that is best at that thing that we're doing. So what is the best company at design that we really look up to? How do they hire and build the team in that department? So how do they actually structure and hire people for design and try to copy what they're doing and bringing people sometimes from that place. And I think a lot of different teams in the company actually mimic different structures we want engineers from, Wall Street. So how do they actually hire these engineers? What background they look for, what structure, what incentives versus a design team versus a marketing team. So you'll probably see if you look at Kalshi employees that different teams are kind of look like they're a little bit mimicked to different companies. But I think that we just have to learn from people that did it better than us, that have done it very well in the past, so that we can kind of learn from their learnings and avoid the similar mistakes and go from there. So that a lot of what we do is like study very good companies and see what their best teams are and what actually made this company very good. And then what's the best team? How do we mimic it? How do we learn from that?
I think more people need to be doing that, because I think people will study companies from a holistic level, but I loved how you broke it down of you'll actually go to the function that you need. So design, you'll go to the best design agency. Right. And that's a really cool way to look at it. And I think more companies should structure their hiring process like that.
It's actually not hard to see the difference, right? If you see like companies that are more design driven, you see there's going to be like a creative department with creative directors, and there's like very clear programs, and design is like kind of an independent part inside of the org. It doesn't report to product or marketing. And other companies that you think are worse at design, actually, is just there's no design team. They're all embedded in there's no like coherent design culture. And there's all these things that if you actually just study specific companies and how they structure their best teams, you can learn and kind of like leapfrog a lot of possible mistakes and things like that.
Okay, so we're going to the questions I ask every guest.
All right.
First is, can you share a system that you have in place that benefits your career or business? And it can be truly a system for anything.
I operate better if I have an extremely structured day, and things from like the time I eat, the time I wake up, the time and days I go to the gym, and like even at work, having meetings in a very specific, like in morning versus the afternoon, and things like that. Because I think that taking a lot of the decision making and randomness out of the day lets you focus on kind of like deep thinking that you need to do. And it's funny, my co-founder is the opposite. He really like cannot do well with routine or structure or anything like that. So we're very different in that way. But for me, it's like it's very clear if I'm in the office in New York and having my day structured as I want, I'm like infinitely more productive.
So the next question comes from the social currency corner, where I get your input on a trend or story that's impacting business and culture. And so we've already brought him up, but the Mamdani of it all for Kalshi was a massive moment.
Yes.
Kalshi was being spoken about from Mamdani himself. The voters, before the election results were announced, were also referencing Kalshi. So my question for you here is, do you think that there's any level of almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy when you have results? Because you can see on Kalshi how things are looking well in advance of the announcement. So do you think that there's any element there where it just kind of then convinces, not on your side, but on the voter side, where they're hearing, oh, well, all right, he has a 90% lead. Like, guess I'm not even going to go to the polls today.
It's an interesting question because you can actually argue for almost both sides, right? You can argue if you're a Mamdani voter, you're not going to want to go because it's a 90% chance also. So you can actually argue that, like, if you were a Cuomo voter, you would be like, oh, he's not going to vote, like, win anyway. Why am I going to waste my time? But you can also make the argument if you're a Mamdani voter and you're like, there's 90% chance it's going to win. Why would I even go? There's been a lot of research that proves that there actually is no impact. People don't change their votes. People don't do these things because of prediction markets. They function in people's heads, or like how they interpret future, very similar to polls, right? And I think that the difference is they are similar to polls and bringing information, but they're better. They're better than polls. On the other point, it's like you can argue for a lot of different things. Like Mamdani said, my odds are over 90%, but there's been elections in the past that actually Elon Musk was like, guys, let's everyone go vote because there's a 10% chance and we need to win. So actually he was using it on the other side. I think it's just very important for the public to have access to unbiased information about the future, and kind of not polarized and, by different news sources and things of the sort. And that's what the function that the markets really bring. So it's like better data about the future, kind of bringing better than polls.
All right, let's end with a listener question. So this question comes from Julia. Could prediction markets actually become a tool that companies use internally, like forecasting product launches, revenue targets, or even whether a marketing campaign will work?
Absolutely. And there's actually quite a few companies that try to do this. I don't know if I'm right, but I think Google actually ran prediction markets internally. I don't think they did with real money, but they used to do it to forecast different release dates and things like that. We also use them at Kalshi. Is this going to be released on time or not? We actually do markets on a lot of things. It's almost like a way to summarize a lot of what we're talking about, because you can see if you have your team and you run these markets, how the bias is going to go down. Even if someone's like, oh, we're definitely going to meet this target. And you're like, okay, are you actually going to put money in the line? We're going to write it down. You're going to have this position and we're going to see what's going to happen. And you see the kind of polarization go down. It's like, oh, but maybe this external partner is going to be delayed here or things like that. And you just see this kind of decrease in polarization and people are more rational about things. So I definitely see that happening.
Wow. Okay. Well, that is a great note to end on. Luana, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm really excited for my audience, especially whoever hasn't checked out Kalshi, to definitely open up your phone right now and go explore, because this is the future, whether or not you're participating in it or not.
Right.
My audience is really excited about being on the cutting edge of whatever's happening in business, and Kalshi's leading the way. So thank you.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Social Currency. I've been wanting to launch this show for so long. I can't tell you how excited I am to do this and how thrilled I am that you're actually here listening. It means the world to me. If you liked what you heard today, please rate and review the podcast, because it massively helps to support the work I do to bring the show to life. And if you want to keep up with the hottest business lore in real time, follow me on Instagram at Sammi Cohen Talks and subscribe to my newsletter, Social Currency, which is linked in the show notes. Social Currency is a production of Social Currency Media and Money News Network. The podcast is hosted and executive produced by me, Sammi Cohen. Social Currency is produced by the Money News Network team. See you next time.